What's up, everyone? We are back and we are on the road heading up to Michigan for the weekend for a show that I have been looking forward to attending for quite some time. It's called DeutscheMarques, and as the name would suggest, it is a show focused on all things German automotive. So we're going to have Porsche, BMW, Volkswagen, Mercedes-Benz, and of course Audi. So I'm bringing my 2015 RS5 to the show that we're driving up in, and really looking forward to that. Going up on Friday night. That's only about 2-3 hours away from Chicago, and the show will be tomorrow morning through the afternoon, hosted out of the Gilmore Car Museum, which is another location I have yet to visit and heard many great things about over the years. More of a historic museum for older vehicles, not as much modern stuff that I typically look for, but nevertheless will be cool to check out the museum while we're there for the show. And attending the show, of course, will be a huge array of different vehicles from all those brands I mentioned, showing up from the Chicagoland area as well as the broader Midwest. It's a very famous and highly renowned show that people enjoy attending. It's actually the 14th year that they have been doing this, so it should be pretty big, and it's actually the biggest German-specific car show in America. And I've never been to any specific German car shows before, so really looking forward to this, and having the opportunity to participate in my RS5 is always pretty cool. But I also wanted to reflect a little bit while I'm there, looking at all these different cars and the other Audis that show up next to mine, and taking a moment to think about what it is that I love so much about all the different German car brands. I love all sorts of cars from all sorts of years and genres, but I always find myself gravitating back towards the German marques. Of course, this is the first German car I've ever owned, but I hope to own many more from Audi, but also AMGs are things that I've always looked at. I've driven many of them over the years, especially because even going back to a young age as a car enthusiast, some of my first experiences in cars were German vehicles. My mom owned a C-Class for many years from a young age. I also, as part of that connection, worked at the Mercedes-Benz dealership she bought it from when I was in high school. That was one of my first ever jobs, working as a service porter there. And then later in college, when I went to University of Iowa, worked at a different dealership part-time there outside of my studies. Shout out Carousel Motors. They had Mercedes-Benz, but also Audi and Volkswagen. And that was where I first actually fell in love with this car. I was working there around 2013 to 2015, which is when the only years, in fact, that the B8.5 Gen RS5 was sold in America, and drove some, delivered some to clients, and really fell in love with the idea of owning one day. So yeah, I've had a lot of experience sitting in, driving in, being around these German cars, and hope to have them in my future for many years to come. But there's something so unique about each brand, I think, that has their own persona and appeal. So I wanted to, think about that a little bit more as I attend DeutscheMarques and think through some of the vehicles that show up and what it is that I find so appealing about each of them, and just kind of dive in a little bit there. So anyway, with that in mind, sit back, and hope you enjoy this look into DeutscheMarques 2026 at the Gilmore Car Museum. So here's Porsche, one of the most celebrated and exciting car brands at the moment, and potentially of all time. When I think of Porsche, I think of a few things: motorsport, precision engineering, and continuous improvement as sort of a pairing to that, because you think about cars like the Boxster Cayman, like the 911 obviously, and they've been around now for so many different generations, and the 911 now going on decades, 50 plus years obviously. And you look at it as a non-car enthusiast maybe, and you think, well, the general shape has not really changed too much, right? The silhouette keeps its shape for, just kind of keeping what works. Even going back to the original 356, it's still a rear-engine car with the flat six, just continuing to improve and evolve over the different generations and the decades that it's been around, and expanding the lineup, expanding the body style ranges, including things like the Speedster and other special iterations of the model. But it stayed true to what it is. And every time they come out with a new generation of the 911, especially the modern ones, since they went to the water-cooled cars with the 996, you just think each time, how can they make this better? How can the next GT3 or the next GT2 or the next Turbo and Turbo S be even better than what they have in front of us today? And yet the engineers find a way. They are just always looking to squeeze every last piece of effort out of the car, whether that's removing ounces from the overall weight, simplifying things, improving response with the turbocharged models, bringing in more of the motorsports-derived technology. There's just always something they can do. And it's just a testament to the engineering might and skill of the Porsche brand that trickles down to all their models. You can see the same things happening now with multiple generations of the Cayenne, the Panamera. They never really shake things up too much. Sure, they introduce some electric variants here and there, and even electric-specific models like the Taycan. But even still, that's a testament, whether you want an electric car or an electric Porsche or not, they make the Taycan look, behave, and drive like an electric Porsche, maybe even like an electric Cayenne type vehicle would behave. It's not just a copycat doing electric cars the same way anyone else would. They are finding their brand, and they know what people expect of a car that has the Porsche shield on it. And they're taking that engineering and design ethos down through the bones of every car they produce. And of course, motorsports, I mean, they have the GT division now producing the RS cars and the GT3s and GT2s and the GT4s, and now even the Turbo GTs for the Taycan and the Cayenne. So they have such a strong connection to their motorsport lineage and their pride of all the success they've had across various disciplines of motorsport. And most notably, the one that I think of is Le Mans. I believe no brand has won at the famed 24 Hour of Le Mans more than Porsche. And their back catalog of incredible race cars is proof of that. Iconic cars like the 917 and the 964 Kremers and other Group 4 and Group 5 variants of the 911 race cars, among many others like the 962 Group C racers and the 936 and so on and so forth. Of course, also Dakar Rally has been a big presence for them with the 959 and other 911s. They really just cut their teeth across all areas of motorsport. And again, that's why it trickles down. So much of what they do and develop in that area of the business makes its way into their performance cars in one way or another. To now, if you showed the current generation GT3 RS to people 20 years ago when the first GT3 RS came out in the 996 chassis, I think they'd be blown away. You'd tell them, oh my God, this car has 4 adjustable dials on the steering wheel to control rebound and spring rates and damping and all this stuff at the fly, or at the finger point of the driver. Things that are normally reserved for true stripped out race cars. Whether or not you know what you're doing when you're adjusting those things or actually take advantage of it is another discussion. But that makes its way into road cars like that because of what they've learned in motorsports and the engineering skill set they deploy when they bring that stuff forward into the GT car program. And I must admit, Porsche is such an exciting brand to me. I do hope to own one or several someday. I particularly like the Cayman R that they made in the 987 generation alongside the first Boxster Spider, but generally being a hardtop coupe guy over a convertible, I would love to find my way into a Cayman R at some point. I don't even care if it's a PDK or a manual. They're just so cool. I just want it to be peridot green metallic because that is the quintessential color for that car, in my opinion. And beyond that, of course, many other cool 911s that I would love to get my hands on. Maybe a 996 Turbo like this one. I also love the Cayenne GTS cars, or if you could get really lucky, maybe even a Cayenne Trans-Siberia. Such a limited production quantity of those globally, so good luck finding the exact well-conditioned one that you want in the US. But they show up every now and then. Would love the black color with the orange decals, if that ever became possible. But we'll see how many of those we find out here today at the Porsche display at DeutscheMarques. So now onto Volkswagen. I think of them as a brand that brings precision engineering to the masses. A lot of what you get from Audi and Porsche brought into more of a, not necessarily a lower price point, but just a more attainable brand image, right? I mean, think of the GTI cars, specifically the Golf GTI. arguably the grandfather of the hot hatch itself, exemplifying that continuous improvement image. Now in its 8th generation, and in fact, one of the only ways to even get your hands on a Golf as a US customer is through either a GTI or a Golf R. Still here, basically being the dependable, accessible performance hatch vehicle for someone who just wants a daily driver with a little bit of zest, a little bit of fun. Across 8 generations now, several variants have brought just dependable performance and accessible excitement to people that might not otherwise be able to afford an Audi RS car or a Porsche or an AMG or a BMW M car. And you see this across many different areas of their brand globally, like the Polo GTI, the Up GTI, different variations of the Beetle, which people always identify as a cult classic. Speaking of other deep cuts, like the Passat W8 cars, or some of the TDIs, the V10 TDI Touareg. Many cars that give people a taste of the precision engineering of a German brand without necessarily even being a performance car, but even still bringing it in at an accessible price point, making things a little bit easier to service. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're cheap to own. Volkswagens of some model ranges are not known necessarily for reliability, but you have, of course, a huge footprint of these cars globally between the iconic Golfs and the Karmann Ghias and the Jettas and the buses and the Vanagons, Rabbits, etc. And then, of course, cult classic icons is a huge part of who Volkswagen is, with things like this, the camper vans, going from the original Type 2 buses to more modern versions of the Vanagon, and even the Eurovan over there that was sold in the US for a period of time and continues overseas with the transporter vans. And then, of course, you have the Thing, the Rabbit truck, and many different Karmann Ghias. Also here spread throughout the field, there's a green one right here. So they just provide kind of a whimsical charm to a lot of the different models that they've developed over the years, while still maintaining that precision engineering, continuous improvement, sharing platforms with other brands, collaborating with other brands like Porsche and Audi at times to take advantage of the cross-collaboration that each of their engineering divisions can provide to one another. And there is such a deep following behind Volkswagen cars. I don't know what I would say is necessarily my favorite or most iconic Volkswagen car, but I've always just appreciated the accessibility and the dependability and the sensibility of the Golf GTIs. I've known people that have owned Mark V and Mark VI GTIs with nothing but good things to say about them. And if I wasn't hunting so many different cars throughout my life, knowing that I live in a city, you could easily make the argument of, why don't I just buy a GTI or maybe a Golf R like this one here in a fantastic color. Gets you all the performance you need, really, out of a daily, while still being completely practical with cargo room and 5 doors. And then look at that there. We got a Harlequin edition of the Mark III Golf from the factory like this, with all the different separately painted panels that they would pick and choose off of other units going through the production line and just mix them all together. I don't know what the production numbers are on these, but again, it kind of contributes to their whimsical nature and the culture behind some of the Volkswagen fandom. And of course, BMW having a huge presence at the show as expected, because this to me ultimately is the brand that focuses on the driver. Hence their classic slogan, of course, the ultimate driving machine, which maybe some people feel has been lost in the current years of the brand with M variants of nearly all of their X crossovers, and maybe you don't like some of the looks of the new M cars or the heavy M5. But the truth remains that has always been core to their brand, and even today you have to give them credit regardless of what you think of some of their models, how they look, what M cars are available. Compared to their peers, they're offering the most manual transmissions of any brand, right? No AMG manuals today, no RS Audi manuals today, and yet BMW, 4 of their cars available right now with a manual. M2, M3, M4, and the Z4, which no true M variant of the current Gen Z4, but you got the M40i or whatever it's called, and you can get a manual while it's still around. And that's pretty impactful in 2026. Everyone's always preaching, save the manuals. Well, there's not many brands in general, in the luxury space especially, that are doing it, outside of your high-end special edition Porsches, and now, you know, some Ferraris maybe doing that with the 12 Cilindri Manuel. But BMW, still there, still focusing on the driver engagement with those manual transmissions, which a little bit of a limited scope into where you can get them exactly. I don't think you can get the manuals on the competition M3 and M4s, for example, but still they have something for everyone. You can get many different specs. In Europe now you have the M3 Touring with even a CS variant of that M3 Touring, along with many other CS variants that they keep coming out with, like the newest M2 CS. But of course, even beyond their newest cars, you have the classics, the Z3, the Z3 Clown Shoe, the 1 Series, even if it's not a 1M. So many different things to love about a car of this size and this tossability. And of course the classics, the E39 M5, the E46 M3, the older E30 M3s, and the prior M2, one of the most celebrated, the F87, I think is the chassis code on that one, and also the Z4, the Z8. So many highlights over the years that really zone in on their ultimate motivator being the driving experience and the driver engagement. Here's the latest. Wait, is it? No, this isn't an M2, is it? This is just a M240i. But still, you get so much increasing scale and return on the performance of these cars as they go through the years, where some of the M Sport cars are now delivering the performance of a true M car from years past. And you get special stuff like the V10 powered cars from the E60 M5 and the 63 M6. And you get iconic iterations of them focusing in on lightweight technology with the M3 CSL from the E46 generation. And man, some of the golden ages of BMW like this. I have always loved the F12/F13 gen of the M6 with competition packages, even manual transmissions available with a very limited production run. You can't argue that they just haven't been serving that driving experience, at least considerably and noticeably more than their peers, because there has not been a manual Audi RS car since I think the original TTRS, and Mercedes-AMG, God, I don't even remember. Maybe an SLK 32 or a C32 from 20 plus years ago. If you know, or if I'm wrong, let me know in the comments, but I can't think of a more recent manual AMG car. So that is where I think BMW shines today and why they still exemplify the driving experience. And then of course, you have so many different directions that the brand has inspired, like the Alpina cars, like you see right here with this B7 turbo, providing equal, if not higher performance with a little bit more of a focus on luxurious comfort for the drivers that are less concerned with rowing their own gears and carving up a track, but still enjoying the long haul experience with the comfort of a BMW and of course the iconic looks. Man, E34 5 Series, one of the best looking BMWs of all time in my opinion. I might even like it more than the E39, which could be a little controversial, but you have Alpina variants of this car, you have the M5 of course, and you have an actual M5 Touring. The first M5 Touring from the factory came from the E34, Europe only obviously, but old enough now that some have been imported and are roaming around the US. Maybe we will find one today. But otherwise, let's continue with DeutscheMarques and see what other interesting vehicles we'll find. Here's one of my favorites from the BMW show. Just like I was mentioning a moment ago, this generation F12 M6, ideally a coupe, but hey, I'll take a convertible like this in Saphir Orange, just looks so impressive. You could get these with a manual and the competition package, making it even rarer. This one I don't believe is a competition model, and it's also an automatic, but still, such a cool color on such a cool high-performance cruiser. But of course, sitting totally outside of BMW's performance brand recognition is the Isetta 600 microcar, enlarged, if you can believe that, from the standard Isetta 300, but still retaining the front door entry that just completely opens the front bodywork, taking the at least part of the steering column with it. That's pretty cool. I've never seen the larger four-wheeled 600 model. I guess the smaller 300 is technically four wheels or four tires, but they're, you know, joined together at the back, basically making it behave like a three-wheeled bubble car. But that's pretty cool to see a very different part of BMW's past that financially actually helped them continue on to become what they would later be known for. All right, so let's talk about Mercedes-Benz. Many things that they can do and have done and have become today, but quite simply, I think of them as the hot rod German performance brand, because I just can't help getting over the images and videos from years past of cars like this C63 going tail happy around the corner, smoking their rear tires, and just being absolutely rambunctious in how they put the power down. And also just seeing many examples around with loud exhaust from the factory, if not modified examples, just being absolutely crazy with burnouts, and knowing that they are just so tail happy on the track. They've never had, you know, the precision to outgun a BMW M car when it really comes down to lap time performance, at least not in most of their history. You know, today things are a little bit different. They come with 4MATIC Plus on most, if not all, of the AMG cars now. They have plug-in hybrid variants with the E-Performance examples. But that's just kind of the AMG I grew up with and still think about. You know, the torque-heavy monsters, both in V8s and, of course, the V12s, like the 65 series cars from the SL and the CL. Big, luxurious cruisers and convertibles that aren't really meant to do things like that at all, and yet they have over 600 pound-feet of torque and can absolutely kill a set of rear tires simply because why not? That is what I think of with AMG, and I love them for it. Especially because you kind of think about their growth and maturity as a brand over the years, coming from the pre-merger years where they were doing things as sort of a skunkworks tuner before getting absorbed by the brand themselves into what they are today. But ever since then, they have been kind of AMG-ifying just about everything. I mean, think of Mercedes cars that don't have an AMG variant at least once over their generation. That's a hard list to create because most do. I mean, look at things like the R-Class. Not technically a minivan, but basically a minivan segment car, and they came out with the R63. Despite the short overall model year run of the R-Class in the US, they still made a, albeit limited, production run of the R63s, where they just took a screaming V8 with over 500 horsepower, rear-wheel drive, and threw it in a car like basically a minivan. You know, that takes guts. Not many brands would do that outside of maybe a special few off-series car or a custom commission. But that's just one example. They've always been doing this. I mean, look at this car here, the GL, now known as the GLS. They made AMG variants of it. I think the first gen didn't, but then ever since, they've had AMG 63 variants of this car, the biggest car they sell in the US. Even go back to when they first started selling crossovers with the ML. The first generation ML had a 55 AMG in its initial generation. They didn't even really know what people wanted back then. That takes guts. The idea of a high-performance crossover and SUV hadn't yet been defined. We didn't have the Cayenne yet. We didn't have, you know, G63s and G65s running all over Hollywood and every major city. It's commonplace now, and people might not realize it, but that ML55 was something different because of AMG, in addition to tuning up all their other standard models, down from the C-Class to the S-Class, all the coupe and convertible variants in between, and even the wagons. One of my favorites right here, the W212 E63 wagons. Simply because why not have all the horsepower, all the torque from a screaming V8 in your practical family wagon? And man, I still love those W212s in general. Probably one of my favorite E-Class generations, but definitely my favorite of the wagon variants. And they still, you know, sort of make these today with the E53 estate. Hopefully a full-on E63 wagon returns in due time to compete with things like the RS6 Avant and the M5 Touring. But of course, like the other brands, they've evolved in many ways. They have EVs now, they have some performance AMG EVs. You can get, this is the EQE electric SUV here, and you can get, I think, a 53 variant of it in AMG or whatever they're calling it. I don't know if it's 53 necessarily, but they have AMG variants of that and the sedan. And they even made, I mean, again, just looking at the depth of their models and the variety, they made AMG variants of the old C-Class coupe that they had in the early 2000s, and even experimented with a CDI diesel model that had AMG treatment to it. Because I guess how I would summarize it is there are always those jokes about FCA and Stellantis kind of like quote-unquote Hellcatting all the things, because they went through the years of the Hellcat twin Dodge cars, but then also putting that engine in the Jeep Trackhawk, in the Wrangler 392, in the Durango, and other variants. I feel like that same approach has been taken with Mercedes-Benz, where they have basically AMG'd all the things. I mean, again, how many haven't had it? Maybe the first gen GL, and then I remember the GLK when that first came out. Interestingly, a very popular car at the time that didn't have an AMG variant, but then the GLC replaced it later, and they've been making AMG variants of that car in two different body shapes ever since, the standard model and the coupe model. And that's just the road they've continued to carve their path down, always providing performance variants across their entire model range. Most recently, they just revealed an electric variant of the CLA 45 AMG sedan and shooting brake that's also available in the rest of the world. So there's no stopping them. And now, things are different again. The technology, the EVs, the mild hybrids, the plug-in hybrids, the F1 derived performance creations like the AMG 1, as well as many other things coming like the Mythos Pure Speed. But still, I feel like they retain that raucous, kind of rambunctious brand behavior that AMG has always kind of been known for in their extroverted styling, usually a little bit more, eccentric than their counterparts from M and Audi S and RS. But again, it's part of that brand image that I love. And I hope to own an AMG or two someday. Maybe that W212 wagon we just saw, maybe a CLS 63. Always love those, and I haven't yet seen one here at the show. Or maybe even an SLK or an SLC. So many different directions you could go in your AMG ownership. A different flavor for everyone because of so many different variants they've made. And finally, let's discuss Audi. Of course, as a current owner, maybe I'm a little biased here, but Audi, I feel like, is understated performance. And this lineup here really kind of highlights that. I know we're not looking at RS cars, which is primarily what we're talking about, but still, you have an all-road, you have a B7 S4 Avant, you have an A6 all-road, and then you have a number of other cars down here with the A8L with a tune on it, SQ5, S6, and of course, many other different Avants and sedans, performance variants of primarily S, lots of S4s and S5s and S6s all over, but they just look so mature in terms of their design. They're never too shouty. I feel like they are the least eccentric compared to their peers in terms of their design. Even when you look at the RS cars. Yes, they sometimes come in flashy colors, and they've got the wide oval exhaust tips at the back and the extra badging that most people might not necessarily pay attention to or recognize. But outside of that, they're pretty stealthy, especially if you get them maybe with like a black optic package or something. They can look like any other commuter car or any other Audi driving around. You wouldn't really know unless you know. And that sort of stealthy, understated sleeper element to their performance approach and their design aesthetic and their luxury combination of all those things is what I really appreciate about Audi. And again, here's a bright Aura Blue RS3, pretty shouty car. But again, you might just think it's kind of a brightly colored sedan because, hey, they made Q3s in orange or bright blue, similar to that one that you could get. Didn't mean they were performance. They just had some kind of eccentric colors for people that like that. But overall, I think of also practicality with their approach to performance because of all the Avants, not just S and RS Avants, but just in general. They've always had so many wagons as a part of their history. Of course, the RS brand itself started with the RS2 Avant. We don't have one of those here, but that was the first, kind of one of the granddaddy performance wagons overall from any brand. And that kickstarted Audi's performance drive with the RS brand after collaborating with Porsche to build that car. And then, of course, since then, it evolved into many iterations of the RS4 Avant, now called the RS5 Avant, confusingly, but also S4 Avants along with that, and also many generations, of course, of S6 and RS6 Avants here and in Europe. So successful, in fact, that they have now finally given us the RS6 Avant in the US, and hopefully will continue to do so. You even have the original or the original C4 chassis of the S6 and S4, which you could get in Avants as well, much like this one here. That's an A4, or no, an A6 Avant from the original chassis generation. You've got the all-roads, which people always love for the lifted wagon approach, even if it's not performance-minded. And yes, AMG have had many variants over the years, AMG variants of, you know, all of their wagons, the E-Class, the C-Class, even the CLA and Shooting Brake in Europe. BMW's had some touring cars over the years, including now. They have both an M5 and an M3 touring, so that's great. So their peers definitely offer solutions in this space, but Audi is still the one that comes to mind for me, with understated practical performance, with the Avants, and just mainly their aesthetic, you know. And of course, Quattro all-wheel drive being a core part of their brand and their performance approach gives you that added engineering, you know, precision in terms of launching the car, the all-road performance, or the all-weather performance, I should say, while again, still being so understated. And let's talk about the R8 too, like this one here. Arguably one of the most successful halo cars from any brand. And it's super exotic and super flashy. It will stand out, even in muted colors, no doubt. But it's still, I mean, look at the design. It's not as shouty as its platform partner, the Lamborghini Gallardo and later the Huracan, because it wasn't intended to be. It was intended to be more of the, I don't want to say softer, but just the more approachable supercar in terms of how it looked. Of course, it still got screaming performance. V8 and later V10 editions, the GT models, they took it racing. They had other different special editions over the years until it most recently discontinued around 2024. Hopefully we'll see a true successor in due time outside of the limited production Nuvolari. But that is like one of the most, you know, kind of approachable, daily drivable, yet still maturely and, you know, distinctly designed supercars out there. And in a different genre of the brand, of course, I feel the same way about my B8.5 RS5 right here. It is so stealthy. If you took the badges off, or even if you leave them on, and people don't know much about the Audi brand, they might not really know that this is a 450 horsepower all-wheel drive performance coupe that can accelerate at the pace it does, around 4.5 seconds, 0 to 60, and yet still incredibly approachable as a daily driver for everyday use, as I literally do. This is my one and only car in the Midwest. You take good care of it, you stay on top of maintenance, you clean it, and there's no reason you can't make it your daily. So long as you can stomach some of the repair costs, obviously. That's a big one. But that aside, it's just such an approachable performance car from a brand that knows how to do subtle yet impressive performance cars. And that will conclude my walkthrough of the show field at the 2026 Deutsche Marks show here at the Gilmore Car Museum, along with a little bit of a dive into each brand's identity and what it means to me as a lifelong car enthusiast who has been so connected to German brands really for as long as I can remember, and of course currently being an Audi owner. Very cool to have the car here and meet some new faces, see some new cars that I haven't seen around the Chicagoland area. Lots of interesting stuff showed up across the different model generations, variants, body styles, wagons, even some custom wagon builds here like this M3 40i Estate that they turned into basically an M3 clone. So anyway, a really cool showcase of German brands and German engineering, and really glad I made it out. It's again the biggest show for German automotive in America. So if you're anywhere in the Midwest, highly recommend you trek up here, or if not, just to check out the Gilmore Car Museum. Was a really cool visit today on a gorgeous summer afternoon. So anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you as always for watching. Like and subscribe for more, and we will see you next time.